line force alone, which, now that I thought about it, might be why the demon was so interested in snagging me as its newest familiar. Tonight I'd find out if my carefully worded verbal contract made 3 months ago would keep me alive and on the right side of the lines. I had agreed to be Aljalirep's familiar voluntarily, if it testified against Piscary, the catch being that I got to keep my soul. The trial had officially ended 2 hours after sunset tonight, sealing the demon's end of the bargain and making my end enforceable. That the undead vampire who controlled most of Cincinnati's underworld had been sentenced to 5 centuries for the murders of the city's best ley line witches hardly seemed important now, especially when I was betting his lawyers would get him out in a measly 1. Right now, the question on everyone's mind on both sides of the law was whether Kiston, his former scion, would be able to hold everything together until the undead vampire got out. Because Ivy wasn't going to do it, scion or no. If I managed to get through this night alive and with my soul intact, I'd start worrying about me a little less and my roommate a little more. But first I had to settle up with the demon. Shoulders so tight they hurt, I took the milky green tapers from my coat pocket and placed them on the circle to represent the points of a pentagram I wouldn't be drawing. I lit them from the white candle I used to make the transfer media. The tiny flames flickered, and I watched for a moment to be sure they weren't going to go out before I stuck the white candle back on the broken grave marker outside the circle. The hushed sound of a car pulled my attention to the high walls dividing the graveyard from our neighbors. Steadying myself to tap the nearby ley line, I tugged my knit cap down, stomped the snow from the hem of my jeans, and made one last check that I had everything. But there was nothing left to procrastinate with. Another slow breath, and I touched my will to the tiny ley line running through the church's graveyard. My breath hissed in through my nose, and I stiffened, almost falling as my equilibrium shifted. The ley line seemed to have picked up the winter chill, slicing through me with an unusual coldness. Putting out a gloved hand, I steadied myself against the candlelit tombstone while the incoming energy continued to build. Once the strength equilibrated, the extra incoming force would flow back to the line. Until then, I had to grit my teeth and bear it as tingling sensations backwashed at the theoretical extremities in my mind that mirrored my real fingers and toes. Each time it was worse. Each time it was faster. Each time it was more of an assault. Though it seemed like forever, the force balanced in a heartbeat. My hands started to sweat, and an uncomfortable sensation of being both hot and cold took me, like being in a fever. I took off my gloves and jammed them into a deep pocket. The charms on my bracelet jingled, clear in the winter-silenced air. They wouldn't help me, not even the cross. I wanted to set my circle quickly. Somehow Aljalirep knew when I tapped a line, and I had to summon it before it showed up on its own and robbed me of the threat of power I might claim as its summoner. The copper spell pot with the transfer media was cold when I picked it up, and did something no witch ever did and lived to tell of it. I stepped forward, putting myself into the same circle I was going to call Aljalirep into. Standing across from the person-sized monument, cemented to the ground, I exhaled. The monolith was covered in a black smut from bacteria and city pollution, making it look like a fallen angel. That the figure was bowed weeping over a sword held horizontally in his hands as an offering only added to the creepy feeling. There was a bird's nest wedged into the fold of the wings as they curved around the body, and the face didn't look right. The arms, too, were too long to be human or Interlander. Even Jenks didn't let his kids play around this one. "Please let me be right," I whispered to the statue as I mentally moved the white rill of salt from this reality to that of the ever after. I staggered as most of the energy pooling in my center was yanked out to force the shift. The media in the pot sloshed, and still not having found my balance, I set it down in the snow before it spilled. My eyes went to the green candles. They had turned eerily transparent, having been moved to the ever after with the salt. The flames, though, existed in both worlds, adding their glow to the night. The power from the line began to build again, the slow increase as uncomfortable as the first quick influx of tapping a line. But the ribbon of salt had been replaced with an equal amount of ever-after reality, arching high to close over my head. Nothing more substantial than air could pass the shifting bands of reality, and because I set the circle, only I could break it, providing I had made it properly to begin with.